Well, for those very quiet speakers, that was the theme to the IT crowd, so as nerdy as I am, for those of you who've never seen that show, you should definitely watch it. All right, so is that entirely too loud?
No, it just seems like that because the walkout song was so underwhelming.
All right, so as Adrian introduced me, my name is Corey McReynolds. I am a security consultant with Sword and Shield, and today we're going to be talking about using containers not just as a delivery tool for like DevOps and things of that nature, but to actually use it for security. So this is a little overview of what we're going to cover. So how many people in here are familiar? Who do know can correct me if I'm wrong. So what we're going to cover is a little intro to containers. We're going to cover using it as a security tool rather than a dev tool, and then we're going to talk about the pitfalls. So for those of you who haven't had a lot of exposure to containers, I'm sure that this may have come up at some point in your enterprise endeavors. They are completely capable of running a full operating system like a VM, but like I said, the real cake is when you drill them down to just the specific resources and access to. What that essentially leads to is that they are highly portable. So everything you need to run a container, kind of like, once again, going back to the Java thing, the Java runtime environment. So if you've got the Java runtime environment on your computer and you download a Java program or app or whatever it may be, it's got all the resources that it needs, but it's based on that Java runtime environment, whereas a container actually has all of the resources it needs built right in, which makes it highly, highly portable. It's gotten so popular that, as you can see, there are all the major cloud computing platforms, even the ones that are contending with Docker, now have support built in for it. Does anybody here work for VMware? No, good, okay. All right, so VMware has been so impressed with what Docker has done. They're a direct contender, and they've actually adopted some of the security features that you can get with containers in their own product. However, the VMware VMs still require all the underlying resources that a normal operating system would require, unlike containers. So what's the big deal with containers? How many here have heard, like maybe some administrative staff, or you've heard some maybe grumblings or interest at the organizations that you work at that that you might be looking at containers in the future? Is anybody hearing that? A few, a handful. If you haven't yet, you will. And if not you directly, you will most likely work with another organization that is utilizing containers. So Joe Beda, the former staff engineer at Google a couple of years ago, stated that everything at Google runs in a container. They start over 2 billion of them a week, and that information was dated about 6 months ago, so it could even be more now. Gartner has indicated that by 2020, 50% of all companies across the board are going to utilize container technology in some form. And Forrester is indicating that 63% of these containers, people utilizing containers, have over 100 deploy, and 82% of them expect to have more than 100 containers deployed within the next 2 years. So that map you see up there is not just ginned up. That's actually all of the enterprise versions of Docker that are running around the world. And you can see this is actually from Docker's 5-year anniversary down there, where they're talking about, and granted, you can take it with a grain of salt, some of their numbers here, but even if you look at the 37 billion container downloads, that really indicates a very strong trend. So whether you want it to or not, it's coming. All right, so now we get to talk about the fun stuff, which is how to use containers for security. So all of it, has everybody here had some experience with layered security? Everybody pretty familiar with that concept, or is there some that aren't? Yes, you guys are not very responsive. Come on, wake up. You've had some donuts and some coffee. Has anybody not had coffee? Does somebody need some coffee? Oh, there's one guy over here. All right, well, you've got an excuse, but everybody else. All right, so layered security, as we commonly know, is the best way of going about security. Nothing is hack-proof. There is no silver bullet. Given enough time and resources, anybody can hack into anything. The whole element of security is to make it more trouble than it's worth for an attacker to get in. And I'm sure Russell back here can attest to that. So they like the stuff that's easy to break into. If we as security professionals had our way, we would just keep on piling on security, and that's what that little cartoon there indicates, to where nobody could access that data. It would be safe, but it's not exactly productive and not necessarily helpful. So we know that that's not a realistic thing that we can do. But that's where compartmentalization comes in. So along with adding layers to security, you can compartmentalize stuff. And so you can take the things that are more important, more critical to your organization, and you can put those in a place that's higher security, while things that maybe aren't as important, or if they were to get lost or if they were to get breached, you can put those in another area that maybe has less security that's easier to access. So we see compartmentalization a lot, especially like in the government, or if any of you have worked with the military before, you'll know that that's kind of a big deal, to compartmentalize information as much as possible. That way, if there's a breach, you limit the amount of damage that it can do. So we can separate these tasks, applications, systems, and resources into these different compartments, and like I said, we can add more layers where they're needed. That reduces that attack surface and mitigates the damage. But the biggest dilemma that we run into is when you're trying to figure out how to compartment things when you have overlapping levels of access. And the best example I can use of this is like a hospital. Does anybody here work in a hospital with IT in general? Okay, so you guys may be familiar with this issue. So you've got a lot of people, and they have varying levels of access. You've got nurses and doctors, and they all have access needs to certain applications. But inevitably, when you have overlapping, like you have some people that have a higher level but can access lower level stuff, but you've got other people who have a higher level of access, but they're not supposed to access that other stuff, it gets very convoluted very, very, very quickly. And application delivery, especially in hospitals, is a very difficult thing to manage because of all those varying levels of access, the varying departments, and things of that nature. So this is where containers can come in and really give us a hand. So containers can be tailored to run specific applications with access limited only to the resources and data it needs to run. That means essentially that you can take and build a container. It can run any application that you need it to run, or any task or process that you may need it to run. And you can tailor it down to where only a specific person has access to it while it's running. It only has access to specific databases or specific networks or other specific containers or VMs or whatever the case may be. But the thing to latch onto is how tunable they are. So you can really isolate that stuff down to a very granular level, which is very important for security because we can really mitigate a lot of risk by doing that. Simultaneous containers can run independently of each other if so desired, but also they can run on the same network, or they can run on different networks but still communicate with each other. So there's a lot of flexibility that you can use in order to put in various separation, various levels of security in between the containers. You can have multiple containers running specific processes for a single application. So if you've got say you've got a process that accesses a sensitive database and you want to protect that process a little bit more, well, you can do that by utilizing a container and really drilling down that security on that specific container running that process, while the rest of the application is running on the other processes that are not as critical. This lends itself to containers being extremely portable. And if you build the security inside of these containers, whether they're an entire VM or whether they're a specific process or application, that wherever that container goes, the security goes with it. So you don't have to worry about, well, if I deliver this application to this new department we've got, do they already have, the various security tools in place that we already have? Or am I going to have to make adjustments to IP access lists and things of that nature, or ACLs, or whatever the case may be? You can configure all of that into a container and then send it out, deliver it, and it can run with everything it needs ready to go. So, in using containers, there are some things that we really need to understand in order to zero in on how dynamic they can be. First and foremost, so Docker, because of its evolution, has really aimed itself as a development tool towards devs. So because of that, they don't really build containers with security in mind. They build them in such a way that they work. They work quickly, they work accurately, that they're productive. So in order to make that happen so easily, especially if you download a container off the Docker market, they have a lot of very terrible defaults. And like I list here, it can be kind of equated to an any rule on a firewall, which is just a terrible, terrible idea. So as a default, they all come on the same network, even though they can be divided up. Most of them will have some sort of admin privileges, and a few of them can even have root access. Though I should mention that at this point, utilizing Docker, that at least one container must have root access in order for all of the containers to work. So obviously that one needs to be protected the most. But there's still room for improvement to where we could see perhaps there's a way to mitigate that layer so that we don't have to give root access to that primary container. So start with developing the container with data security as the primary purpose. So right now, a lot of places use containers, like I said, in the development cycle, developing apps, delivering them. So do we have developers in the room? A couple. All right, I love you guys. I may be a little harsh on you just a little bit, but I do love you. So as a developer, right, a lot of times there is undue pressure put on you to make something work, to create this application or piece of software, whatever the case may be, to make it work. Well, Docker kind of does the same thing. So they don't typically look at it and build it with saying, well, how are we going to make this secure? They go, how are we going to make this work? Then after it works, they go, well, how are we going to make this secure? And in that kind of lies some of the problem. But a lot of that can be curbed by utilizing like secure coding practices, looking at stuff like OWASP, making sure, as I'm sure you developers know, using a complete secure development cycle or process in order to develop these containers or the applications or processes that lay in them. There is some security built into Docker. Primarily, it's static security. So Docker kind of functions the same way that like the Apple Store or the Google Play Store works. So they get an application, they take a look at it and they go, well, it looks okay. It doesn't look like there's anything bad in it. It's sitting there, the image of it is sitting there. And Docker kind of does the same thing. When they produce these not the VMs, but the containers to run in VMs or standard desktops or whatever else the case may be, when they put those on their marketplace, they take that static image of that container, they look at it and they say, well, it looks good, doesn't look like there's any viruses on it, doesn't look like there's anything malicious on it, it's good to go. But the problem with that lies in that is that between the time that you download it, between the time that it's delivered or that it's changed or whatever else, we don't know what might happen to it or what might get injected to it. And point in fact, most of the vulnerabilities that occur with Docker and containers actually come from implanting containers with other containers with a rogue process or application of sorts. And then they use a breakout to get control of all of them. And then that's a bad day. So we can do some things, though, to mitigate this. We can look at containers kind of the same way we do when we look at network segmentation or the way we handle privileged accounts. We build them with the principle of least privilege in mind. Create the containers only with the access and resources they need to complete their designated task and nothing else. Don't leave open ports. With containers, you can really dig into the details of locking that to where it's utilizing only one port for one process to access to only one thing on one network. So there's no reason why we can't drill that down and get it ultra secure. So another catch, and there is always a catch. So containers are still relatively young, and they definitely don't have an easy learning curve. A lot of people are familiar with containers in the sense of Docker because we've all heard of Docker or we've seen their cute little whale carrying the containers. But very few have dug in to understand the underlying complexities and implications of that technology. From a high-end enterprise standpoint, a lot of C-suite folks will hear, well, it's fast delivery and it's easy delivery and it's just so quick and easy and it's got low overhead, and they think, oh, that sounds great, but they don't think about all the complications that come along with that. Docker Enterprise is actually, and I've already mentioned this previously, is the only enterprise offering that has adequate support and a substantial marketplace for containers. So they're the only ones that have service level agreements and things like that they are willing to put up for organizations. There are other offerings out there, Linux LXC, CoreOS Rocket, Canonical LXD. All of those are open source projects. Canonical is probably the second lead charging forward, and I know that they are working on a enterprise level container product, but it's not out yet. But now where the real market competition comes in is with the container orchestration. So Apache, Google, Docker, and there's about 1 million others. They all have products that deal with orchestration. So when you're developing, when you've got a container, you've got a bunch of containers, and you can have hundreds of thousands of containers running if you so desired, if you've got the system resources to handle it. But how do we deal with all those? Well, with VMs, you've got hypervisor or VMware, some sort of management console to deal with that. Well, with containers, you have an orchestrator, which is just their fancy word for management. Containers are relatively easy to deploy using Docker and their pre-made marketplace. That's really where that big perk comes from. But as we all know, when you buy anything pre-made and pre-configured, a lot of times it's not properly configured, and that can definitely be a big issue. So definitely watch out for it. And then the other thing is that there's fear in the unknown. So a lot of us, might not have a good idea of what, like I said, you might kind of understand. You're like, well, I guess it's like a VM. And like I said, there are a lot of similarities there, but there's so many underlying complexities to the architecture. You can have containers inside of containers inside of containers, and they can run different processes for the same application or different applications. They can run full OSs, or they can run stripped down processes. I mean, there's so much to build there. The connections in between them, like if you look at various network topologies and stuff dealing with containers, it can look insane. I mean, it just looks like spaghetti on a plate when you get it to all of the connections that containers can actively make. So, there's a lot of fear in not fully understanding them and being worried that it might be too much to undertake. And here's the other one, and once again, devs, like I said, we love you. So what happens when developers, if we don't use the ones that are pre-made off the marketplace, which we really shouldn't, we should be developing them ourselves. But then that lays all of the pressure of developing these systems, and that's what they are, to a developer. Well, that effectively turns a developer into a sysadmin because they're making all of the decisions on how these processes or applications or operating systems work. Do we have sysadmins in here? Oh, you're a sysadmin too, so you're an exception to the rule. Where's the other one? So sysadmins are the exception to this rule by far because you guys have a better knowledge about the way things like this need to be secured because you can handle it like a system. In order for the containers to be secured and used as a layer of security, a secure development process is crucial to this. And like I said, our developers with systems experience know this, or if they have security experience. Without that systems or security experience, devs are not equipped to be able to handle the security they need to be able to handle in order to develop containers. Because effectively, it's like they're creating a system, and they are the admin of that system. And so if those of you who have any systems admin experience, or you are security guys, or whatever the case may be, I'm sure that you have realized often, with the exception of the developers that have system admin experience, a lot of times the developers are focused on just making something work, and they are not focused at all on the security aspect, because that's not their job. They just want to get it up and running. So we have to educate and train them. If you're going to have developers that are going to be working on containers, it is crucial that they get systems training, that they get security training, and they know about the practices so that they can build that with security in mind as opposed to an afterthought. So simplicity versus complexity, which we've already kind of hit on just a little bit. So like I said, the concept of containers is simple, but the underlying architecture is very, very, very complex. Pre-made containers are easier to deploy, but how secure is that marketplace? Who here trusts every Android application on Google Play? That's what I thought. What about repositories? How many of you used GitHub and stuff like that before? Pretty good number. Do you trust everything you would download off GitHub? All right, so that goes to prove the point. These are images. These are pre-made images that are there for download, but there's no telling after just a static security check that they're as secure as they're intended to be. So we can liken it to traditional infrastructure security. We can look at adding layers to it, but it's no easy task when you start having hundreds of containers with lots of connections. Who here deals with a very large, like, virtual machine environment? Anybody consider their environment pretty large? And have you guys dealt with the security in that environment? And is it a complete headache? Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of things, a lot of complexity that can go into this. The biggest thing to focus on when we're looking at this security is there's a number of ways we can approach it. So there are a lot of companies out there that try to secure containers from the side, or from above, or from below. So they try to secure the hardware or the software that sits below the containers, or the management engine, or they try to do checks on the connections on the Docker container. So what's it connected to? What's the traffic that's coming out of it? They do like deep packet inspection and things of that nature, which are all great and all important. Or they might even look at the applications and processes that it's spitting out. But a crucial area that many have not looked at is actually building internal controls within the container, which I mentioned earlier. There's only one company right now that I'm aware of that does actually do this. But I think we can push and we can do better. So where do we go from here? So the biggest thing is education. All of the information we need for containers, Docker, all of this stuff, it is readily available and it's out there. And even though that technologically speaking, containers are still really in their infancy, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of people out there playing with them, doing really, really neat things with them. There are a lot of organizations that have adopted Docker or have adopted containers in some form that aren't using them in production, they're just using them in development. And so once again, there's still that fear of, well, we've got it, we're kind of playing with it, but I'm not really sure that I trust it that much just yet. So we need to experiment and test with it. Docker community is free to download. Anybody can get a hold of it. You can start messing around with it, and you can start playing with security protocols and things with it. You can look at building security into it yourself. You can look at creating your own images or applications or processes. And a lot of those, even if you're not a coder, a lot of those processes or applications, you can download the code for that to place in a container just to do some testing or to play with it. And continue to spread the word. So educate people about containers. This can be an incredible, incredible security tool. We have the capability to drill down processes, applications, all the things that we need to separate and segregate and divide. We can drill that down to a really, really granular level. We can separate all of this stuff out and get such a granular level of control that there's no reason we cannot make this stuff a complete pain for anybody to want to break into, assuming that we're not using defaults. Because once again, if we take the easy way out and we just use default applications just because it's easy and they're easy to deploy and they're easy to run, it's just not going to do us any good. They're going to be vulnerable and kind of like, I liken this a lot to like DMZs. So are people relatively familiar with DMZs? Pretty so? Okay. So, and as I'm sure a lot of you know, DMZs can be a great security tool, right? They can provide a great buffer for us in a network. However, they can be just as big as a vulnerability, as a protection, if they're improperly configured, can they not? It's a big deal. If not, they're just as big of a liability and a vulnerability. So get involved, follow and contribute to the community. Like I said, you don't have to be a coder or a developer. Voice as a security professional, as sysadmins or developers, or whatever the case may be, you can look at what's going on with containers and with container security, and you can voice your opinions at conferences, directly to vendors. There's no reason why you can't get involved. And as security professionals especially, we need to push them towards those secure coding practices and the making security the focus instead of the afterthought. So that's pretty much what I've got as far as the bulk of it. So I'm going to take some questions now, if anybody has, and I hope you guys got a few or something like that. I felt like I kind of rushed through it. Yeah, what's up?
How do you prevent another Spectre vulnerability with Docker? Say you reverse engineer the Docker engine, and now you have access to all those containers.
So with Spectre, truth be told, there's not really. I mean, given that that's at a firmware level on the chip, you're talking about something that in all reality cannot be prevented. We can band-aid it, but it can't be protected against. So hopefully moving forward, Intel and AMD do their due diligence to make that not a vulnerability. But truth be told, all we can do is try and secure. Now, I will mention though that by using containers, you can create a lot of layers of abstraction from the firmware. So once again, it's that concept of, well, if you put enough layers on it or you make it so complex, that individuals they're going to look at it and go, well, this is not worth my time to get into and break into whatever this may be. So you can, because like I said, you can place containers within containers, you can place those containers within VMs. There's a lot of layers there that if you've got something really important or a really critical process, you can really bury it deep and it can still function without any latency or worries. Because it's all still built on the same hardware. So does that kind of answer? Yeah. Any others? Yes?
Have you found anybody using signing to make sure the containers haven't been manipulated?
Yes, and there's actually a lot of work going on in that area. So there's been, so right now, they do verification signatures, and I think even Docker does this to a limited degree, to verify the authenticity of the marketplace containers. However, there's a big push by a lot of companies to once again build those certification processes into the container so that you're not having to apply a certificate to it, but it's got the certificate built inside of it so that wherever you transfer it, it's going to be able to get that authentic verification. But yeah, there's a lot of work going on in that area right now. If you're super geeky and nerdy and really like certificates, it's pretty cool stuff. Okay, so just like when you turn on, like, say you've got a server or you've got a desktop or whatever else, and say you're running a hypervisor or whatever else, you have to turn on the virtualization on your hardware in order to allow that to run. Docker does a similar type of thing. So in order for it to, and it will actually, if you've got a laptop or a desktop, you can try this at home. If you download Docker, it will actually tell you that it's going to enable certain features on your hardware, and it's going to disable virtualization for other things, kind of like VirtualBox, for instance. So it'll tell you that VirtualBox will no longer work once you turn on Docker. I know, it's really crazy. And that's all on Docker. That's not on containers in general. But anyway, so in order for those containers to work, in order for them to be virtualized and broken up and all those processes to be connected in some way, or in order to be able to build those connections, it has to have that root connection down to the firmware.
So that only exists in the Windows and Mac versions. Does that apply to the Linux world as well?
It absolutely does not, because Linux is very different structurally. So yeah, you don't have that requirement. Which is also why containers have traditionally been built on Linux systems.
So you mentioned that developers would kind of have to become sysadmins. How do you handle the segregation of duties principle or concept where developers should have access to, say, production environments? With containers, would they pre-configure everything in a non-prod environment and propagate all of those configuration settings out? Or if in prod you need to make configuration changes, who would do that if devs/sysadmins can't do it?
And that is an excellent question, and that's one of the things that organizations will have to figure out. In my personal opinion, I think that if devs are properly trained, if they have the experience and stuff that they need, I don't think that there's a problem with, because they're going to be much more familiar with the architecture of that container. I don't think there's any issue with them pushing.
Totally agree. It's the mindset and the culture
Yeah.
of, let's say, the traditional corporate environment that needs to change, because they're very ingrained with the whole concept of segregation of duties. So
Yes, yeah.
I totally agree with you.
And
how
this-
you overcome that.
And containers, in a lot of ways, you really have to, and organizations will have a hard time with this. You've really got to rethink the way you look at segregation of duties, because this kind of breaks down a lot of walls where there used to be separate jobs, because you're once again, it goes to that whole concept of container. You're building everything into one little thing. So the people who create that, they're really the owners of that. They're going to be the most familiar with it, and they're, generally speaking, going to be the best equipped to make any fixes or configuration changes or whatever the case may be. But they do need to be educated. They've got to know security, and they've got to know systems. I mean, it's just a necessity for them. But you're totally right. There has to be a cultural shift. And that's kind of what I touched on, when I was talking about, spreading the word and, letting people know about this, educating people. So, spin yourself up on it. Take that information. When people ask questions, know how to approach them. There's nothing wrong with changing the traditional ways. Oh, the final countdown. Woo. All right. So there's nothing wrong with changing the traditional ways that we've seen separation of duties and using the principle of least privilege or whatever else. But when we talk about something that's this new and this different, architecturally speaking, we do have to change our mindset and be willing to adapt to those changes. But really, honestly, when you start looking at the logistics of it and all of the perks that come with it, it's really kind of a good change, because now you've got people who formerly were just focused on making things work, but now they're educated security people too. So, and this is one of my biggest emphasis with containers. Containers are our dev tool right now. People are looking at them as a security tool. But if we approach it just like the way we approach creating an application or piece of software, instead of creating something that goes, I want to create this application to do this, why don't we create it with the mindset of, I want to create this application to protect this. So it can still function the way it needs to function, but there's always that mindset of ingraining security into what you're doing, so that the whole endpoint is to protect the user, to protect the data, to protect the connection, rather than as approaching it as an afterthought. Sorry, that was a little long-winded. I apologize. Any other questions? Anybody got it? Yeah.
So how do you not protect? And this is just my ignorance. So vulnerability scanners and assessment tools, do they have an implementation for Docker containers?
So the one company that I had up on that screen earlier, and there's only one company I'm aware of that's doing this currently, but there are a lot of companies looking into it. So, and this is really cool. Sorry if I geek out. So to answer that question, there on the market as a whole, no. But there are a lot of companies that are out there that are looking at, like, if you look at like Alien Vault or any of these other security appliances that are out there, or SIMs that deploy sensors, they're looking at deploying or injecting sensors inside the container so that it travels with the container, so that no matter where you go, it's giving that reporting and stuff like that, which is very cool. Any other questions? Not one. You guys in the back? You look so lonely back there.
Something like Twistlock or Aqua, absolutely must have.
So once again, Twistlock and those are very good examples of, and once again, it's this layered approach to security. But they're looking at Twistlock. I think if I remember correctly, they're one of the ones that are looking at like the connections between containers and stuff like that, which is very, very important. I am completely in support of taking a holistic approach. So having a couple of tools, or even having, God willing, one day, a vendor that looks at the container security from every perspective instead of just one, we still need to include all of that. So yeah, so those, at this point, something like that would be a necessity, but we don't need to forget about the security inside the container as well. But like I said, hopefully, God willing, one day we'll have somebody come along and they're like, hey, we got a one solution fits all for these containers, but not there yet. Yes?
So since all the processes of container are actually still running on host and still visible to any agents running on host, are you aware of any vendors that are at the moment leveraging that? You know, something running in, I can't say namespace 0 because it's not actually 0, but the initial namespace
Yeah.
could still introspect anything running in any container. And do we see any vendors doing that? Because there's
Yes.
nasty side effects from shoving a namespace in a container.
Yeah, so there are. So once again, some of the solutions that were mentioned earlier, they look at the connections, and there's even like deep packet inspection, watching the traffic going in and out of the containers and things of that nature. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways, because like I said, you can approach it from, you can monitor the software below, or you can look at the connections from side to side, or you can look at the stuff that is actually coming out of the container. But yeah, there's a lot of different, and once again, there's like probably 200 vendors out there right now that all have solutions to secure containers. And some of them kind of wrap that up as just general cloud computing, or they wrap it up specifically for containers, but they all approach the problems from different angles. I know that's kind of vague, but it's the best answer I got.
One more.
Yes.
Traditionally, the security would be built into the app, right? Authorization to application areas would be built into the app. With what you discussed, it almost sounds like a lot of that control is at the container level, or can be at the container level. So how do you contrast one with the other? Application level control within the app, managed within the app, authorization to app areas, or at the container level, or both, or do you need to do both, one or the other?
Once again, I'm a security guy, and some of you may fault me who are more into ops, but I would say both. But that's the security guy's approach to, like, if you can secure it, of course. But realistically, I think that it truly depends on the architecture and what you're trying to do with that application. So if it makes sense, like if it's something like, if you're talking about various physical locations or something that's going out to clients or something like that, obviously there would be a bigger focus on that internal, or that at that core level. But if it's something that's only being utilized internally, that's not being executed outside of a secure environment, well, then you've got a little bit more flexibility.
Cool, that makes sense.
Anything else before I get kicked off stage? Did you guys enjoy it relatively? Yeah? Pretty educational? Yeah? Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. All right, well, I guess I'm going to say goodbye. You guys have a wonderful day. If you have any questions for me or would like to discuss anything, please feel free to catch me and talk my ear off or whatever the case may be. I hope you guys have a great day. Yes. Check, 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 one. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I can give you what you want, but you got to come home to me. I got some good old loving and I got some.
Hey everybody, my name is Jay. I am with Rapid7 and I help run our penetration testing services organization. So this talk isn't a technical talk. You guys just got through one of the technical talks here. This one is really just a conversation about my experience building teams, running teams, and what I think it takes to put together a security team, a pen testing team that really wasn't comprised at all of pen testers from the beginning. And so really it's just sharing my experiences going through that. Every security talk should have disclaimers. Mine comes with some as well. First of all, it's not a formula and it's not a recipe, right? This is really all not science at all, and it's not been peer reviewed. Not much is. It really is all about just my experience over the years of putting teams together, of really thinking about what it takes to put that team together and what those team members mean to the team as a whole. So given all of those, we're going to doodly-do a little bit and go back in time and talk about what my career has looked like over the last 15, 16 years. I'm from El Paso, Texas, born and raised. So Austin is a mecca for us El Pasoans. There's a ton of us there. And we recognize each other just by the way we talk or how we wear our hats. And I started there in 2001 at UT Austin, the other UT, as a web developer. I went in doing a lot of web applications. UT Austin has, at the time, had their own web scripting language that was created to mirror the natural programming language. How many natural developers in here? Yeah, that's what I thought. Do you guys even know what natural is? No. Natural is used by a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, by some universities and then some financial institutions like Bank of America, for example. And it's a mainframe programming language. And so UT had a ton of mainframe developers, and they saw, oh wait, we've got a code for the web. We don't have any web developers. Let's create a web scripting language that has the same syntax, the same language as natural. And then let's get these developers trained, or these natural developers trained on web technologies. That came with pros and cons, and they soon realized that they actually needed to bolster their ranks with actual web developers because those natural developers were trying to code their web scripts just like a mainframe program, and it wasn't quite working, right? They weren't understanding the stateless nature of developing in that way, and so that's where I came in. I joined UT Austin in 2001. I was there for close to 10 years. In that time, I was a developer, a sysadmin, an architect, all kinds of roles as you grow in that environment. 6 years into my stint there, I moved into the libraries, and I was working with the libraries for all UT system and other Texas universities like Texas A&M. We fight, but we like each other, and we work together really well. And we were doing the Texas Digital Library, and it was really a repository of a lot of knowledge, a lot of papers, and also the workflow by which Texas University doctorate candidates were submitting their paperwork. So it was a huge repository. At the time, I was working on implementing DSpace, which was an MIT open source project that was a data repository. And working through that, I found what I thought was a quality engineering bug. It had to do with authentication and authorization. I didn't think twice. I fixed it. I submitted the pull request.
and it was accepted. And so I felt like, cool, I submitted something in an open source project, let me talk about it. In that talk, the Chief Information Security Officer was in the audience. And after the talk, he came to me and said, I think I've got a spot for you on my security team. And I was like, that's cool. I don't know anything about security. But that's where I cut my teeth. It was a team of 4 risk analysts that I was a part of, pen testers, advisory services, whatever it is that any of the entities at the university needed in order to secure, whether it was their building or their applications or you name it, we worked with them to do that. UT is a very distributed university, so every business unit, every college were our clients, and so it was very much a consultant type of work in that way. And so I became a security analyst in 2008, and I stayed there for an additional 3 years or so. Life and family happens, and my wife and I decided to have children, and so we needed more money. And the state doesn't pay. And so I had a ton of great experience. I learned a lot, but I needed to do something different for me and for my family. And so I moved into a security engineer and support developer role at Optaros, which is a small boutique development shop that does, at the time, a Magento and Drupal mashup for all of our clients so that they could do e-commerce and content management all within the same platform. And that worked really well. I managed teams out of Costa Rica, Ukraine, and in Austin, and then I was also the security engineer for the whole company. So securing all of our virtual machines, securing our platform, making sure that that Magento Drupal mashup was actually secure, both for the administrators, but then also for the end users, etc. So and I continued, this was more of a hybrid role, developer and security engineer. And then finally, I moved over to Bazaar Voice in 2012. Do you guys know Bazaar Voice? Anybody? If you do any shopping and decide to do any review or rating of a product, not on Amazon, not on Walmart, they do their own things, but pretty much everybody else, you're using Bazaar Voice's product. And it's a JavaScript drop-in that then draws the DOM or on the DOM all of the functionality for that product. And I was the only security engineer of a company of about 1,000 with approximately 300 developers. And so it was a tall order, right? When I came in, they had no security program. And so I was lucky that I was that guy, because I got to build it all out from the development lifecycle to, again, physical security, policies, procedures, all of that stuff, right? When auditors came in, they put me in front of them. So I had to do it all. And I had to be embedded in the development teams as well, because we wanted to incrementally improve the security of the product. I was there for 2 years. As you may imagine, being the only security engineer takes a toll, right? And if you're pushing and pushing and pushing for a team to be built and it isn't being built, then you find yourself wanting to be somewhere else, right? Like, it's not a fun job to be the only person, because you've got no other people to collaborate to make you better. And that should always be what you're striving to, right? You want to make your company better, but you also want to make yourself better at the same time. And so luckily Rackspace had a spot for me, and I went in as a manager of quality and security engineering. At Rackspace, security engineering falls under quality engineering, and it's quality engineering, performance engineering, and security engineering. And I was managing those 3 teams. So I had security engineers, I had quality engineers, I had performance engineers that I was helping to secure all of the products, whether it was bare metal all the way to Docker from Rackspace, right? As we were putting them out there in the marketplace, we were making sure that we were testing them so that we felt that they were as secure as possible. Sometimes we did it all in-house. Sometimes we brought in outside help. All along this timeline, I was a Rapid7 client. So we had all the product at UT Austin, and then I brought it in at Optaros, I brought it in at Bazaar Voice. Believe it or not, I brought it in at Rackspace, which was a tall order. It took forever, but we did it. And because of that ongoing relationship, as you guys know, opportunities come up. And so I had always had my eye on Rapid7 local to Austin, see all the guys at meetups, know HD more, like all of those things said, this is where I want to be, right? I want to do nothing but security. Because no matter what role you've had along the way, you're always asked to do something outside of security all the time. And I didn't want that anymore. And so I moved over in August of 2016 to Rapid7 to help manage the penetration testing team on the services side. Since then, my role has kind of changed and gone back and forth, and now I lead the entire pen testing organization and the consultant development side for Rapid7. Consultant development because, as you'll see, we hire folks that weren't consultants, and we need to develop them as a consultant and as a pen tester. And so we need to do both sides of it, right? There's always the technical and the soft side of stuff. If I want to put somebody in front of a client, then they can't just be technical. They've got to be able to convey that risk to our clients. Okay, so that's me in a nutshell, or in a squiggly line. As I think about teams, I often think about baseball teams. I love baseball. I've played it since I was 3 years old. I still play it now. I coach my son's team. It's this little guy right here. And so baseball is always in my mind, right? I wake up, I look at scores. In the afternoon, I'm at practices, we're playing, or we're having our games. And to me, baseball is a great team sport and very much analogous to the stuff that I want to do at work with my teams. I know, it seems kind of funky, but it actually works. Because I think about who is the pitcher, right, that team lead, who's the catcher, that guy that has that knowledge of the team for a long time, who's my rookie right fielder, who's that star center fielder, right, who's that all-star shortstop. And you need all of those people on your team in order to make that team really successful, right? And guess what? The right fielder is actually good, right? It isn't just the worst player on the team that you put out there. You want to think about that team as you're building it. And this is what helps me. So I'm not saying you should think about it in baseball terms, but find that thing that you like, that you enjoy, that makes you think about a puzzle and apply it in a way that helps you to put your teams together, right? Because there's always that, right? All right. So as I started to think about a team that I was asked to build for Rapid7, when I came in, the director at the time said, listen, I need you to hire 12 pen testers for this team that you're going to have. And immediately I was like, 12? You're nuts, right? Like, it took you 6 months to find me. It's taken us on average 3 months to find the next pen tester for the team. How are we going to do 12 in 12 months? And he said, well, that's your challenge. And I said, okay, challenge accepted, right? Like, what else are you going to do? I just got here. I'm not going to say, well, I can't do it. So I took it on, and I said, okay, let's do it. And so I started to think about how I was going to build that team, who my shortstop, my pitcher, et cetera. And as I was thinking about it, I started to go back to all of the roles that I had that prepared me to be a security engineer or a pen tester along the way. And I wasn't going to find folks like me out in the marketplace unless I was willing to pay high money, right? Luckily, we're in an industry that pays us well. But unluckily, we're in an industry that pays well, so it's hard to put a team together, given budgets, et cetera. And so rather than try and find individuals like me or the really experienced pen testers, I had the idea to say, let me bring in individual people that have held the roles that I have held along the way, that have an aptitude for security testing, that want to do it or want to learn it. And that's how I started to kind of say, okay, I think I can put this team together. Austin, luckily, is a tech hub, right? We've got all kinds of technology companies there, all kinds of technologists in the Austin area, whether they're developers, DevOps engineers, even data analysts, et cetera, right? I mean, they're everywhere there. There's all kinds of companies. And so I started to think about, like, who are the people that I want on my team that I think that can help each other to become pen testers and consultants. And so I put together, and this is just a short list. Really, it's a list of icons that I could find that made sense for the role, so that I can put it up on my slide. Developer, obvious, right? Sysadmin, data analyst, technical writer, malware analyst, quality engineer, ethical hackers, security analysts, network administrators, and the list goes on and on and on, right? Because every one of these roles I have to know in order to properly pen test my client's environment, right? If I don't know aspects of this, then I'm going to miss something. There's going to be a gap there. There's going to be risk that I didn't actually investigate, right? And so I then took this list and really started to say, great, but how are they going to help each other? And so this is what we'll talk about, right? Once I found the list, then I needed to talk to my talent acquisition team, right? Let them know exactly who I was looking for. Let them know where to look for them. Understand what kinds of teams, right, we needed to be, what companies I wanted to actually go after, what personalities, why we were doing it, right? You can't just expect your talent acquisition person your recruiter, to get it immediately. So it took ongoing conversations, right? And she started mining, and then she would put people in front of me and then be like, that one was close, but this is what's needed. And so having that continuous kind of feedback for that talent acquisition person to really understand what it is that you're looking for and why, right? And initially, it was way off the mark, right? It was like, nope, they're way too junior, right? A developer. They actually didn't even know what security testing might be, and so let's do a little bit better, right? Luckily, security is penetrating better into all of the other roles, right? And so I didn't have to find individuals that knew nothing about security. We wanted to find individuals that already had a security component to the role that they had, right? That were already in a secured development lifecycle, or they were already part of the change management team, or they were already part of the risk management team, or the audit team, or the acquisition and mergers team, right? Like all of these components, or all of these roles have a security component that helps you to kind of start in the right direction. So she started to do a great job. She started putting in front a lot of people that made a lot of sense. A product tester from Plantronics, a technical writer from the state, a malware analyst, local, a recent graduate but had already been super involved in the security community in Las Vegas, speaking at BSides, having talks and interviews and all kinds of things, right? Like being involved in the community, and that's what we wanted to see. And it was great. We were getting all of these folks, but we needed to interview them. We need to really figure out, are these the folks that we want on the team? We think we do, right? They're the right persona. They're matching all of that criteria that we talked about with talent acquisition. But do we actually want them on the team? And so really what it boils down to is to putting together another team, right? And initially I had no one because there was nobody on the team, right? I had to hire. But we did have other pen testing teams. We had the Metasploit team. We had our sales counterparts. We had all kinds of other teams that can actually help me to tell, is this the right person? Is this the right person culturally? Is this the right team fit, aptitude-wise, technical ability? Do you feel like you can work with them? And so put together that interview team that is multiple people, right? Whenever you interview for any of my teams, you're talking to 5 to 7 people, right? They might be 30-minute conversations, or it might be an hour with 2 people on the line, but you're talking to that many people because we want to see, is this an individual that these 7 people feel like should join the team? But not just that, they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. So by putting together a team and having 7 people, they get to know more people, they get to understand the company better, they get to understand their role better. And so it's a kind of quid pro quo, right? They get something, we get something. At the end of the day, if we're going to make an offer, then they already feel like they know, they understand the team, they know players on the team, etc., right? It's like playing catch and making sure that you want to continue to play with these individuals, right? Okay. So before I go in there, there's another piece of it that was really, really important. And that's talking to your HR department. At Rapid7, you call it people strategy. And then talking to your finance department as well, right? figuring out exactly what that pay band is for this role that you are creating, right? This wasn't a pen tester, right? As a matter of fact, the title of it is security analyst, whereas we have security consultant, senior security consultant, and principal, right? And so it didn't even have consultant attached to it yet, because we were looking for individuals that weren't necessarily a consultant that we were going to turn into consultants, right? So they helped me doing the market analysis. Does this fit within the industry? And within the industry, does the pay band fit? Is this where we can actually go and find the people that you're talking about that you want to find, right? That's really important, because then when you have somebody in front of you, go ahead.
So initially, so I understand it correctly, these individuals, given their skill level and experience level, were going to be put in like an incubator environment where you were going to grow them, nurture them, and build them into consultants, and then free them to be consultants.
It's awesome that with everything that I already said, you already got there, right? Because that's exactly what we were doing, right? I was putting together a bullpen, if you will, hello, another baseball term, right? Where people could be playing, could be catching, could be learning, could be, learning how to throw that curve, that slider, that circle change, whatever, right? And they're building their skills. And they're playing along with other experienced professionals that are already there so that they can learn from them as well. That's exactly right. That's what I wanted to accomplish, right? The tricky part here is that within that band of financials, right, they actually needed to make their own money to pay themselves, right? So they have to be billable. They have to be utilizable. That's just how our consultant organization works, right? Yes, they carry a salary, but that salary is paid out of the billable engagements that we put in front of them from quarter to quarter to quarter. And so that was a huge challenge for me to be able to say, what kind of engagements can I put these individuals on, right? And so be thinking about that, and we'll talk a little bit about it in a sec. Cool. So they're new, right? Day one, here they come. In my opinion, day one isn't day one. Day one is 2 weeks prior, right? 3 weeks prior, a week prior, whatever that period of time is, right? You're already reaching out to them. You're already saying, hey, I'm glad you're on the team. Here's some stuff that you should know. What kind of equipment do you want, right? For us, we've got 2 separate packages. You can be a Mac guy, you can be a PC guy, and then we'll give you a laptop with an image and another laptop without an image so that you can image. And so I need to figure all of that stuff out to give IT the heads up that they need to provide this for them. But it's really about welcoming them, right? For some of these folks, I made them move from Atlanta, from all kinds of places, right? And so, hey, how's the move going? Have you found an apartment? We're providing you relocation assistance. Did that come already? Like, be engaged before they land on day one, because they're already nervous about that move. They're already nervous about starting a new company. And so anything that you can do to kind of set them at ease before they even land is going to mean that when they do land, they already feel comfortable, right? If you can, if they're local, have a happy hour before they even start, right? Have the team out so that they can get to know the team in a social event and not on day one. Now they've got to remember however many names, right? Plus all the others for the office. It's an awkward situation. You guys have all been there and have all thought, God, I wish my first day was better, right? So be thinking about that for sure. Have their station already set up, right? Whatever it is that they told you they wanted, then make sure that you acquire it and then you have it set up for them and it's ready for them to use on that day one, right? We've got like dual monitor setups and stand-up desks and all of that stuff, right? Like make sure that you've got what they need. And ask them, right? Like, how do you work better? Are you a stand-up person? Are you a sit-down person? Are you a mobile person, right? You're always like, I'll set up wherever. We can accommodate all of that at Rapid7. Think about what you can do where you are and start to put that together for them so that when they get there, they don't have to waste time asking for an anti-fatigue mat or a bar stool height chair or whatever it is they need. It's there, right? They're not wasting time, not feeling like they've got to do stuff. Have a new hire journey for them, right? Make sure that you set out exactly what you want them to accomplish in that first week or in that first 2 weeks, right? Like, what does it look like to be a new hire? Work with people's strategy. Work with your office manager. Make sure that there's a tour. Have swag set out for them so that they know, like, hey, we value you. Here's some stuff that you can help us advertise out there when you're out there, right? Have expectations and keys to success, right? Like these are all questions that all of you know or want to know whenever you land at a new job. How can I be successful here? Like what can I do to immediately make an impact? And then already be ready for shadowing and first engagements. They're not here yet, but our lead time can be 4 to 6 weeks, which means that I can already be setting stuff up as soon as I know that they accepted the offer and that they're coming in, right? So be prepared. Just as you want them to be prepared when they first get here, you should be prepared for them as well. So, you know, these are examples of slides that I actually use for my onboarding stuff. You know, they land with at Rapid 7 we're moose. It's singular and it's plural, so one moose. And so you can see them progress, right? Like they don't have any antlers, and as they're exceeding, then their antlers begin to grow. Yeah, it's quirky, yeah, it's whatever, but people notice it, right? And they see that there's effort put forth into this onboarding that is not just like, hey, click here and read this big bulleted list and, you know, here's a video, etc., right? Like, make it meaningful for your team. Help set what that personality of your team is with your onboarding materials, with the conversations that you're having, right? Help them understand what kind of team they just landed on. Here's the other snippets of slides, right? Like keys to success. What does it mean to be successful on this team? How are we acting as a team, etc. And then that week 1 schedule, right? Like it's not micromanaging. You can't micromanage somebody that doesn't know what they're supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis, right? And so you've got to tell them what it is that you expect for them to do on that day-to-day. Setting up their machines, setting up internal tools, meeting people, right? All of the other roles that are going to help them to be successful here. You should be introducing them to them, right? Like don't let them go out and figure it out because they might miss out on something, right? So put in front of them all of the folks that you already want them to know and understand, right? And I know that they're just a representative, like we've got a ton of account executives and a ton of sales engineers. But if you find a few that you really like how they work, you really like how you work with them together, then bring them into the fold and ask them to help you onboard your team. They're going to be happy to do it, right? And so that's you know, I focus a lot on what are you going to do on the first day that you land. I've been in that timeline at places where they actually said, we don't expect anything from you for the first 6 months, right? That to me sounds ridiculous because I'm here to work, right? I'm here to learn, I'm here to produce, I want to do better, and I want to progress. And I know that that's the kind of people that I'm hiring because I'm hiring them, right? So I don't want to tell them like, oh yeah, don't worry about that, it'll be a few months. That just sounds ridiculous to me, especially if I'm expecting them to be billable as quickly as possible so that they can start earning their keep, right? So I want to put all of these things in front of them. And so if you look at some of the stuff on the schedule, right, there's already some shadowing. You're looking at, we've got kickoff calls, let's shadow one of those. We've got a closeout call, let's shadow one of those. We have internals, externals, wireless, whatever all the types of engagements that we have. Let's try and get you shadowing as many of those as possible, right? Oh wait, you already come with some experience? Heck, let's put you on a billable engagement, right? Let's do a vulnerability scan with validated findings, or let's do an external if you've got that much skill, right? You'd be surprised how many developers are coming to us with OSAP already because they're super interested. They want to know it. They want to understand it so that they can apply it to their current role. Now we're taking it out and saying, now it is your role, right? And so there were some that I was able to get billable on the 3rd week of them joining, right? Because we were able to pair them up with somebody else that was very much experienced, or they came with enough experience that I felt comfortable putting a PM alongside with them, putting a technical writer alongside with them, that they'd be able to produce not just the soft skills, but also the deliverables that were going to make our clients happy. And the value was going to be there, right? And so you want to think about that for every single one of them. There were other individuals on the team that weren't billable for the first 6 months that they were on the team, right? And it's not because we didn't have a plan for them, it's just that their plan took a little longer, right? And so because they just needed to learn, they needed to be comfortable. And that's the other thing, right? Don't force it. If you see value in that individual, then work within that value, right? Because if you're forcing it, they're going to be frustrated, they're not going to want to do it, and you're going to lose a lot of time and a lot of investment because they're going to walk, right? And so as long as you feel like you can support it, then be supportive, right? Cool. Feel free to interrupt at any point with questions. I think it'll be all right. Training. I may be showing my age here, but some of you know who this is. The thing here is, right, is that you interviewed them, you know where they're coming from, you talked about what they wanted to learn, you asked what they already learned, and so you know them pretty well by the time they started. So you should also start to be thinking about where are the gaps and what kind of training do I need to put in front of them so that I can get them billable as quickly as possible, right? Whether it's how to write reports, or whether it's how to attack web applications or APIs or whatever other technology, right, that they want to test, then you want to put that training in front of them. At Rapid7, we have application assault, we have network assault, so those are easy to say, hey, take these, you're going to learn a ton from it. And then we will send them out to individual trainings as needed, right? So it's important, and then don't forget about yourself too. And I think that that's something that we tend to forget as people managers sometimes, is that we're so focused on everybody else, we're so focused on the business that we don't refresh our knowledge, right? My certification lapsed, or I want to go after that other thing, but when am I going to find time to do it? Carve out that time, right? Like, it's important. And then it is about that supporting cast, right? So we want to make sure, just like we talked about earlier, that bullpen was a collaborative environment, that they were actually coming into the office, right? Because it's easy to work remotely, but we wanted to ensure that everybody had the opportunity to grow. And I didn't hire 12 people on the same day, right? It was a period of about 10 months that it took to actually get to the number. And so that meant that there were folks on the team that already had a lot more experience by the time that somebody else landed. So they now become a part of that supporting cast, right? How did you order your Amex? Oh, I know, I just did it last week. Yeah, I mean, even with that, right, you need support, because it isn't always about the technical, right? The technical might actually be easier for that individual to learn on their own. Read a book, go through a course, whatever. But it's really about everything else. And so you want to have a good supporting cast. At Rapid7, we're very lucky that we have a full team of project managers to work alongside all of our consultants so they don't have to project manage. We have a team of technical writers that are helping to deliver the high quality reports. We have a stable of like 34 pen testers now, which means that any questions, right, can be asked and answered by the team. And that's not just on learning or training, it's also on a live engagement, right? If you're on site and you come across a technology that you've never tested before or you're stuck on, then you know that you've got the support of that entire team to help you through that engagement, right? And deliver that value. And so that's important, that you continue to foster that collaboration and that team identity so that they feel like they can reach out to each other and work together, right? So that supporting cast is extremely important to have. You as the manager, you have to be their plow. You have to be their defense. You've got to move barriers. You've got to make sure that they have everything they need to be successful. And then you also have to block, right? Anything that is kind of asking for their time, you've got to be aware of. And you've got to be able to say, yes, you can, or no, you can, and here are the reasons why. And don't feel bad about it, right? I think that if you do it with transparency and you let that individual contributor know why they can't go and help whatever team on this cool new thing that is being built, then they'll understand. But at the same time, don't just shut the door on things, right? Find a way to enable them to be able to do that. Maybe right now isn't the right time, but maybe a week from now or 2 weeks from now, or let's put together a week of bench time so that, so that you are working towards that, right? And then there's a goal for it in mind. And then all of this should be a scheduled maintenance, right? You don't just do it at the beginning. You should be doing it over and over and over again, right? Have weekly or bi-weekly meetings or monthly meetings, whatever works for that individual. Make it so that they own it, right? so that it's not on you, it's on them to figure out what it is that they want to talk about, how they want to grow, etc. Give them the opportunity to control what they work on, right? If all I do is put externals in front of somebody, then they're going to burn out, they're not going to want to do it anymore, they're going to walk, right? Instead, if I have a conversation with them and I find out what they are interested in, what technologies they want to test, right? Like, I want to be a red team operator. All right, well, you're here, and our red team operators are here. Let's figure out how you get there, right? But figuring that out should be a conversation, should be something that they're helping you to understand, right? Recognize and reward good work. Whether it's a beer or at Rapid 7 we give out guitar picks whenever we feel somebody did something really well. Do it, right? Like, be good about doing it, and don't do it for one person and then forget to do it for somebody else, because then they'll notice, right? So be consistent across it. Have clear expectations and then reasonable demands, right? Let them know exactly what it is that you expect on them, but then make sure that it is actually attainable, right? And the expectations shouldn't be the same across the board for your entire team, because we're all different and we all learn different and we all apply our learning different. So make sure that you're thinking about that. Provide challenges and work outside of main responsibilities, right? For me, this is really important because I've got 35 pen testers that I don't want to burn out. Consultant burnout is a real thing, right? And so what we do is that we actually carve out a percentage of their time for research, for bench time, for making sure that they are feeding themselves and not just feeding the business, right? That's really important to me. The reality of it is that because they're doing that research, they're still feeding the business, but it's really feeding their own personal growth and their own want to do this, right? We're not requiring it, they're doing it, and they're providing it in that back sense. But then, that's, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks that they didn't have to talk to a client, they didn't have to write a report, they didn't have to dress up to go on site, they didn't have to do any of those things, right? So when they do come back to it, they're going to be refreshed, renewed, they're going to feel better about doing it, and if you continue that good cycle, then you're going to get good consultants that continue to deliver good stuff, right? And then reduce the chaos in high pressure situations by planning and preparing, right? For me, that means having the PMs, having the technical writers, having the managers for escalation, having the principals that are working on our technical solutions, so that my consultants are really just thinking about their job and how they can handle that job, and they don't have to worry about all of these other things or pushes and pulls of their time, etc. And then you, right? They say, and statistics are made up of 80% false statistics or something like that. The people don't quit their job, right? They quit their managers, or they quit their leadership. And so that's why it needs to be a scheduled maintenance, right? Like, make sure that you're providing them what they need as a team, and that they're telling you, right? And also be open and ask, is there anything that I or the rest of the leadership team could be doing better, right? Like, what isn't helping? What is helping? What isn't helping? And understand that, right? Like, yeah, you need them to act when you ask them to do something, but at the same time, I also want to sit down and have beers with them, right? Because we drink. And so you've got to tote that balance, and they've got to understand that you're their advocate, but you're also requiring that they do the work, right? So find that balance and work through that. That one's not easy, for sure. What do I have? No job should be too small for you, right? That's me up in the corner over there taping our lab. We moved offices a few months ago. We went to an iconic building in downtown Austin called the Frost Tower. And we landed first in temporary space as they blew out and are building our amazing new space. We have to make do with what we had. Making do with that lab space wasn't going to work, and so we put in a little bit of effort to make it what we needed to. I needed to frost the windows because we've got client agreements that says that if I'm testing hardware, nobody else can see what we're doing. We needed to get rid of carpet and put something that wasn't going to have all the static electricity coming from it. And so when I'm talking about preparing your team space for that day one, that's exactly what I was doing, right? I was making sure that when the rest of the team landed in the Austin office, they didn't open the door to the lab and say, fuck, we got to fix this, right? I wanted them to open that door to the lab and say, hells yeah, let's get to work, right? And so all weekend, I probably was high on aerosol. Not probably, I was pretty high on aerosol. And you bring along some of the guys that want to help, because then they feel the ownership. They're going to keep the lab clean. They're going to want to work in that lab. And so, yeah, no job should be too small, right? Like whether I'm in front of our board or whether I'm on my knees putting floor down, it's all for the team, right? And that's what they should see coming from you. I don't know what my next slide is, and it ends abrupt, so I know. So all of this is to say, right, like I've been at a lot of jobs, and I've seen the good, I've seen the bad, and I've taken them all to try and make it so that the good is what my team sees as they're working at Rapid7 and progressing through it. And then questions. Yes?
Functional team alignment, agile team alignment, hybrid, somewhere in between. Where would you say your team management leadership style is at the current time?
I've led teams in all of those, and so for me, I think it's more of a hybrid. For the current team, now I'm leading a team of managers, right? So those are the folks that report directly to me, are the managers that are now kind of leading these individuals. And so we have to be very agile, but then we also have to be kind of very pragmatic with the things that we're doing and the upper management that we're dealing with and the clients that we're talking to, right? And so we're agile at the individual contributor level because I need them to pivot and pivot quickly. And so it's very hybrid. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
What's your thoughts on work-life balance?
Yeah. Work-life balance is a myth. I don't like the term, but I know it's important. So I'll talk about my work-life balance, right? I think that you have to manage it yourself. I don't think that you should expect your company to manage it for you. We know you as individuals, but we don't know where that stress trigger really is, and so we can help you to manage it. At Rapid7, we have unlimited vacation, and so as long as you can work that through your manager and the business, then you can be out for 2, 3, 4, 6 weeks if you need to. Our schedule, right, for our, let's just talk about our senior security consultants. They're 75% utilizable, 25% for balancing, right? See, it's not balanced. It's not 50-50, so that's why it's a myth. But that 25% allows them to then do research or take vacations or do the things that they're interested in doing so that they don't feel the pressures of the job all the time, right? For me, it's playing ball on Mondays, it's coaching on Wednesdays, playing with the Little Leaguers on Thursdays and Saturdays, and practicing again on Sundays, right? So my balance comes from being on the baseball field, and I make sure that I make time for that, right? Luckily, a lot of that time is weekends and evenings, and so that's how you have to figure out what it is that is going to reinvigorate you to get you back at work at your best, right? Any other questions? Yeah?
See much difference between the millennials and the older generations?
I think that there is, but I don't think that the kind of generalization is truly there, right? I've hired a lot of young kids, and I do call them my kids because they're really young, right? Like I'm 43 years old, and I'm hiring 25, 24-year-olds, right? So they're nearly half my age. And they're extremely high-performing, super responsible, and they're doing really, really well to progress. Yeah.
But you're choosing those because of the interview process.
That's exactly right, right? And so what helps is the fact that they've got to talk to 7 people that are going to say yay or nay, right? And so we vet those individuals and that personality and et cetera. Do we miss? Yes, right? We had to let go of somebody because after 4 weeks we realized this is not the person, right? And that's another thing, like quickly, right? Like, if you know that they're going to draw away from your team, then let's not have them here, right? Like, and that's tough. You're affecting a life, but then you've got 10 other lives that you need to worry and concern about, right? And then we lost somebody else that after 4 months, they realized the consultant life isn't for me, right? Like, I didn't realize I needed to go on site as often as it was happening, and we've got family and all of that stuff, and so they decided to go back to where they were before. So we do miss, it's gonna happen, but 2 out of 14 is pretty good for the year. It's a great question. Any other questions? Sweet, I'm all done. Thank you guys.
Oh, well. No audio, but how many of you remember that Super Bowl commercial from 2000, right? Or we can talk about the millennials that he was talking about earlier that he hired that, you know, at this point they were still in grade school. They couldn't stay up to watch the Super Bowl commercials. All right, a little bit about me. First of all, I'm not a psychologist. I don't play one on TV. I'm not going to pretend to be one here, but we are going to talk about some psychological things. Not an animal behavioral specialist, though we will be talking about some of that as well. I do consider myself a self-proclaimed hacker since the time that I had my TI-99-4A with a 300 baud modem and doing dial pulse strings because we wouldn't pay for touch-tone phone in the house. So fun things like that. I spent many years at Hewlett-Packard as a field engineer, traveling all over this part of the country, East Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, Southeast Kentucky, visiting customers, doing hardware support, network support, installations, a lot of things like that. Currently working as a security architect for Scripps Networks, or now Discovery, used to be Scripps Networks. Get to work with a lot of our users, do security education there, awareness. I'm also on the faculty with the University of Phoenix. So I get to teach information security courses, cybersecurity courses, networking courses with them, help to work on course development. And I'm really passionate about security awareness. Several years ago, I got to hear Jason Street speak at DEF CON in their social engineering village. And one thing he said really jumped out at me. He said, at the end of the day, people don't care about your security awareness training. They don't care, right? They've got a job to do. Their job is to do X, Y, Z. They're there at work to do that job, to get that done so they can go home and do the things they really do care about. When you take 2 hours out of their day to make them sit in a security awareness training, that's just 2 hours that they can't be doing the things that are important to them. And so one of the things that he recommended was maybe we might want to change our security awareness training, or maybe do some things to make people aware of the things that they can do to protect their personal data or their family's data or their social engineering profiles. And then that would be something they'd be interested in, and they might be able to then take those behaviors and transfer those into the workplace. And so I started to do some of that over the last couple years in our company. I have really had some success. I've had the opportunity to share some of those with local library systems and some other folks in East Tennessee to really help to spread security awareness among non-security professionals and among non-IT professionals, and that's been fun. I'm also involved in the East Tennessee ISC Squared Charter Chapter. How many of you have heard of that so far? Okay. If you haven't, check with the check-in desks. They're supposed to have information about it. Charles Headley is around here somewhere. He's the ISC Squared East Tennessee Charter Chapter Membership Coordinator. We've got to say Charter Chapter. We can't call ourselves a chapter yet because we're still getting all of that going. So right now, if you're involved with ISC Squared at all, if you're ISC Squared certified, come see us. Get your name down on so that we can get you involved in the charter chapter. Once we've met the requirements over the next several months, we'll be able to open it up and anybody will be able to be involved, and it should be able to help to expand our security community in East Tennessee. So that's enough about me because you didn't come here to hear about me. Let's talk about what I'm going to be talking about. And let me give you a little bit of background. I've got a son and a daughter who are in high school. My son wants to become a vet, and he's very excited and passionate about that. He's my academic. My daughter is my social butterfly. She goes to school to spend time with her friends, and if she happens to learn something, that's gravy. She does work hard at her learning, but she comes at it from a completely different perspective. And they've been bugging us for pets for years, and we tried to do the fish, and that didn't work, and we did some gerbils, and that didn't work. And my wife had cats before we got married, but her allergies just got worse and worse, and I have allergies to them, and when the kids were born, we found as we visited people, they had allergies, so this was really something that was not going to be part of the equation for us. And over the years, the kids have asked, we want a puppy, we want a cat, and we tried a puppy breed that was supposed to be non-allergenic, and it didn't work for us. And This past year, my daughter said, you know, I've heard there are some breeds of cats that don't produce as many allergens, and maybe we could look into some of that. And I heard from some other people who actually have some cats that do that, that it might actually be an option. So I told her, okay, well, you do some research and let me know what you find out. Well, she emailed me a 12-page paper about the breeds of cats that wouldn't produce allergens and the things you could do to help fight the allergies and all this to make it work. And I was really excited, right? But I'm a college instructor, so the first thing I did was scan her paper for plagiarism. And surely she just copied this from somewhere, right? No, she'd actually put the effort into it. And as my social butterfly, my non-academic person, I really saw the value in that, and that I said, I have to reward this behavior. We're going to be talking about rewarding behavior throughout here. I have to reward this behavior. So we started to look into it. The long and the short of it is a few months ago, we adopted Elfie and Athena, 3-month-old female Siamese cats. And I will say that so far they're working well with our allergy issues right now. So as that happened, that kind of changed our lives a little bit. We're having to deal with all the issues that you have with 3-4-month-old kittens, right? And how you adapt them to your family and try to get them to adapt to the things they should be doing. And as I've been doing security awareness, I started to draw some parallels with the things that we're having to do to get the kittens to behave in a specific way and the things we want to do to get our users to behave in a specific way. And that's kind of where the foundation of this talk came from. I kind of threw it out there as a fun topic, and I was really surprised they accepted it. So I hope you all enjoy it. Let's get started. Our goal is to modify behavior. And to do that, you have to initially start talking about attitude, right? Attitude is important. If you go into it with a bad attitude, things aren't going to work. If you're trying to modify the behavior of somebody that already is having an attitude, you know, you're going to have some issues. So you have to take into account the attitude of the target and what perspective they're coming from, and take that into account. I'll give you an example. Again, I was a field engineer with HP. I was responding to a lot of people that had stuff that was broken, right? By the time they called me, they were already aggravated. One of my customers up in Johnson City was American Water Heater Group, and I got to work with them over several months with an ongoing issue with HP DDS4 tape drives that were failing on a frequent, like once a week basis. And you know, they'd get ready to do their afternoon tape processing and backups and things like that, and the tape drive would fail regularly. And I got another call from them, you know, tape drives failed again. You've got a half-an-hour window to get this replaced. We can take an outage right before that, before we have to start all our backup jobs to get in there. They came into it with a bit of an attitude because they had an issue. I was able to come into it with a bit of an attitude as well. I was able to go, okay, American Water Heater Group is about 2 miles from Greg's Pizza. So I'm going to call in an order. How many of you are from Tri-Cities or are familiar with Greg's Pizza in Johnson City? All right? Awesome place. If you've never tried it and you get to Johnson City, give it a try. You can't eat there. You have to take it out somewhere, but it's very good. So I stopped at Greg's Pizza, had already called ahead the order, so I brought in a stack of pizzas, so the IT staff was enjoying the pizza, and we could get that going. And eventually HP figured out their parts problems and got the issue resolved. But you know, you have to deal with the attitude in order to modify behavior. So what kinds of behavior are we looking at, or what do we want to do? We're wanting to reduce or eliminate undesired behavior, right? In this case, you know, in the case of your cats, this is one of the behaviors you want to eliminate, that destruction of everything coming and going from natural things that they want to do. What are some of the user behaviors that we want to get rid of? Yeah, obviously, clicking on links or opening attachments in emails, picking up that USB stick that they found wherever and plugging it in, you know, downloading, installing software, circumventing your security controls. What are some of the other behaviors that your users have? Feel free to shout out that you might want to change, or you want to stop.
Holding the door for people.
Yeah, letting people in. Buying that laptop at the yard sale and bringing it in and plugging it in at their desk so they can figure out if they got it working. Don't you hate it when your IT admins do that and then they go, well, I'm going to get on the network with my administrative credentials. Yeah. So we want to try to work on modifying behavior. And of course, we initially respond negatively, right? Don't do that. Well, before we go there, let's talk a little bit about operant conditioning. There are a lot of different ways that we can modify behavior, and here's where some of the psychology stuff comes into it. They call it operant conditioning. One of the first ways is positive reinforcement. I'm sorry that's so small. But positive reinforcement is where you give something good when good behavior is done. It's a reward type thing, right? Positive reinforcement. In the case you see there, so the dog is not jumping up on her, so she gives the dog a treat, pats the dog on the head, that positive reinforcement type thing. The next one we have is negative punishment. Negative punishment, you're taking away something good in order to change the behavior. So the dog jumps up on them and they turn away. They take away that, they're not going to pay the dog attention anymore. This is one I use a lot with the cats. They've learned that when my alarm goes off in the morning, they can jump up on the bed and they'll get a little bit of petting before I have to get up and take a shower and what have you. But they can't tell time. And they may not necessarily hear the alarm, but they may think, it's got to be time, right? They'll jump up on the bed. Is it time to get petted? You know, if I roll over the other way and ignore them, they've learned, no, it's not time yet. And so that's that negative punishment where you're taking something away. Then you have positive punishment where you're adding something when the negative behavior has. So, the dog jumps up on you, you maybe, bop it on the nose. Or the classic with the cat's that water bottle, right? So that's negative punishment where you're providing some type of a feedback to reduce negative behavior. And finally, negative reinforcement where you're taking away something bad in order to stop behavior. So the dog starts jumping up on you and you're pushing them down. And then when they stop jumping, you stop pushing. That's negative reinforcement. We oftentimes will err on the side of negative reinforcement or punishment when it comes to security controls and when it comes to modifying user behavior, right? Has anyone seen the bad human bottle so that we can deal with our users? So what are some of the things that we do that are providing those types of feedbacks, right? You get the user pop-ups that say, hey, you shouldn't do that. Or we're blocking certain activities, or when users start to do something repeatedly, we're going to take away their privileges. Your machine has been infected 3 times, so you don't get to be a local admin anymore. We're reacting to that and making it look like we think our users are bad, giving them that negative feedback. Again, leading with negative reinforcement rather than positive reinforcement. And users can see the attitude that communicates with that. There may be times when we have to isolate their system and they can't do their job. Are we communicating that this is being done for a reason to protect the network, or are we communicating, hey, you're bad, you did something bad again, and now we're smacking you on the hand? Or the times when we have to call the users, how often are we interacting with the users in a way that's positive, or how often are we communicating to them, you idiot, what are you doing? Even if we're not actually saying the words. We're setting ourselves up for failure, and it's not going to work. So what are our options? Well, we can look more on the positive reinforcement side, where we try to reward the behavior, or we try to redirect behavior in a positive way. Again, I'll give an example with the cats. One of our cats, Athena, likes to burrow. She likes to dig in among covers and things like that. So in the middle of the night, if you're sleeping and she hops up on the bed, she may try to crawl in between the comforter and the blanket, or the blanket and the sheet between my wife and I, and that's no way to get a good night's sleep. And the first couple times, get out of there, don't do that. That doesn't work. What we found is if we were able to very positively take her out, put a little blanket at the foot of the bed, set her down there and cover her up with that blanket, she's got the same effect. She's in there with us. She's now got her little comfortable area under the covers. It changed the behavior, so it's not doing the bad thing anymore, and it's meeting both of the needs. So you have to kind of look for those examples as you're having your user interactions and the ways that you can do that. But again, you have to have the right attitude about it. And people can perceive attitudes. Cats are smart. They'll be able to tell how you're interacting with them and the attitude that you have along with it. Smithsonian did a recent study. They published it in 2014 about how smart cats are. And at the end of the study, they found that they said, all we can tell you is cats are smart. We can't tell you how smart because their individuality becomes such a factor in it, you can't really evaluate intelligence. With dogs, you train them to do something, you tell them to do something, they do it. With cats, you tell them to do something, and they may choose to, they may not. There's no way to evaluate if it was because they just didn't understand what you didn't want or they didn't care, right? Because they're individuals, right? Our users are the same way. Our users have other priorities. Our users are intelligent. Our users are not stupid, right? And they're going to have other priorities. So, we may be telling them constantly, you need to do this, you need to do this, or you may need to do this other thing. And they've got other things that are factors in that we're not considering. It's not because they're stupid. It's just because of the other factors that are part of the equation. How many of you, show of hands, how many of you have fallen into this trap here, right? Where you talk about the PEBCAC error, problem exists between chair and computer, or the ID10T stuff, right? We've all done it. We've all fallen into that trap of evaluating our users and our people that we're supporting through that filter of, well, they should know this stuff. I mean, we know this stuff. They should know this stuff. Well, maybe they shouldn't, or maybe we shouldn't have those expectations, or maybe we should stop with these type of perceptions that end up communicating more than we expect, even when we're not saying that directly to their face. It's important. Our users aren't morons. They're not idiots. They're not dumb. They're not stupid. They're not clueless. All right? They're trying to do the things that they're trying to do to get their job done, and it's our job to support them and to do it in a positive manner. The other thing that's part of the factor is that shame and embarrassment are not effective motivators. Okay, that's been proven psychologically time and time again. You can read various different things. There's a reference in here because, hey, college teacher, you got to reference and cite everything, and there's references at the end. But it's not an effective deterrent. Here's an example. Intermedia, they're a business cloud provider, did a survey last year, 1,000 office workers. And in the survey, they asked them about different things. And one of the things that they found out was 59% of the employees who were hit by ransomware paid the ransom out of their own pockets rather than contacting their IT departments or their security departments. Let that sink in for just a minute. We're talking about payments, $300 to $1,000 a pop, that these users are paying because they're too afraid of being shamed by their security department or by their IT department or possibly losing their job or other things like that. What type of negative reinforcement have we done? What security posture does this put your environments in if users are going to do that type of thing when they've got ransomware instead of letting people know so that they can intercept it? And this could spread through your environments, and who knows what else is left on their computers after they've maybe paid, and yeah, here's the key to unencrypt it, and we're not going to get you again. You don't know, but we've set up a culture and an environment where our users are afraid to report. If they called in, are they going to get a positive response? Or is that help desk person going to go, why did you do that? Is a security person going to say, why would you click the link? There is no prince there that's going to give you money if you click. How often are we responding positively? I had the opportunity to listen to Startup Security Weekly back in August of last year, and Ronnie Feldman was on there. And he works for Learning and Entertainment, and he does security training. And he does it from an improv standpoint. And if you ever get a chance to listen to it, again, it was Startup Security Weekly in August. You can look for Ronnie Feldman or what have you. But it's from an improv perspective. Are you familiar with improv? How many of you watched Whose Line Is It Anyway? Who can tell me what the main key of improv is? There's one small phrase that's the main key of all improv. Yes, and. That's exactly it. I've got it up on the screen, duh. I'm like, where is it? That's supposed to be on my next slide. Yeah, yes, and. When we can start to put our training and our security awareness and even our interactions with our users into that yes, and posture, we can change the equation. So a user says, well, I need to be able to install software to... Yes, you do need to be able to do your job, and we need to be able to secure the environment. So let's work with you to try to come up with something that works together so that we can meet your requirements and the security requirements instead of, no, you can't install. Why would you want to install software? It's a completely different attitude, a completely different perspective. And our goal is to be able to develop habits, right? And to be able to develop positive habits, change bad habits, or develop positive habits before things become bad habits. So we're going to give you another example. Cats scratch stuff, right? They do. We just know that. Why? It's normal. It's an instinctual behavior. They do it to remove the dead outer layers of their claw. They can't chew their nails like we can. So they do it to remove the claws. They do it to mark their territory. They do it to stretch and flex. Variety of different reasons. So how do we deal with that? Well, I mean, we provide alternatives, right? You get them a scratching post. You have to make sure that you can provide alternatives that work for them and that work for you. You know, that might work well for your cat and yourself, or you might need to go to something a little bit more extreme. We've settled for something in the middle right now, though it keeps getting bigger and more. And every time my wife goes shopping, I brought home some more cat toys. Okay. But yeah, you have to figure out the solution that's going to work for them and that's going to work for you, that's going to change the behavior, and you have to make it fun. Again, have that positive reinforcement, that way of working with them to make sure that it's an incentive to do the positive thing. So then when they come over to the couch and they reach up their claws, you can be there and grab them, move them over to the scratching post, let them know. And then when they've done that, or when they're on that, you reinforce that. Yes, that's very good. You know, you give them that reinforcement. You also want to limit their ability to do harm. So, you know, if you have that super nice, expensive couch that the minute they sink their claws into it, they're going to leave things there. You know, you might want to hang a little bit of aluminum foil there or something, limit their ability to do harm so they get a little bit of feedback. Or if you've got, you know, the nice vase that's sitting on a stand and they might want to use that stand to scratch on, you take the vase and move it until you can change the behavior. You want to limit their ability to do harm, also to harm themselves. I never thought I was going to have to, with 2 kids in high school, go back out and find child locks for cabinets, right? By the way, if any of you have gone through that and you're needing to find child locks now, you can't get them at Lowe's and Home Depot anymore. They stopped carrying them. I had to go to Target to get child locks. But I had to put child locks on the cabinets because we got chemicals and other things in there. The cats quickly figured out how to open the cabinet doors. And you know, there were things in there that could do them harm. So while we're trying to train them not to get in there, we had to be able to put controls in place to limit their ability to harm themselves or harm some of the other things around. You want to be able to remove that access or limit access to sensitive or harmful areas. And you've got to be able to provide constant reinforcement, right? It's got to be consistent. You can't have it so that I'm working on the computer, the cat's over there scratching on the couch, I'm just going to ignore it because I'm working on the computer. You've got to be able to provide constant reinforcement all the time in order to modify behavior. Otherwise, you've got an inconsistent message. And remember that scolding only works if you catch them in the act. So if you're gone for the day and you come home and the couch is scratched up, you can't take the cat over there and say, look at what you did. It doesn't work. They don't associate that. Now, even though our users and people are more intelligent and they can make those associations better, they've got better memory for being able to do that, it's still ineffective for our users. So let's take the same things we just talked about and translate them in for modifying user behaviors. People click stuff. They just do, right? Why? Why do users click things? Well, it might be habit. That's what they do all day long, right? They get there, they click this, they click that. They're used to maybe having to click through on an error or click through on a license agreement. They click things. It's a habit. They might open emails because why? They might be important. I might miss something that's important. I don't care that it went to quarantine. It's got something in there that looks urgent, so I'm going to take it back out and look at it, right? Or they might be coming from the perception that nothing bad will happen. Surely opening this email can't cause me any problems, or clicking that link, because we've got a security department and they're protecting us, right? So it may be that perception that nothing bad can happen. Or maybe even we're encouraging it. Okay, how many of us tell our users all the time, do not open attachments, especially if they come from people you don't. Do not click on links in email, even if it does come from somebody you know, because, you know, who knows, they might have given away their password and their account's been compromised, and now you've got a phishing mail that's going out internally from internal users to internal users. I mean, it happens, right? So we tell our users that. How many of you tell your users, don't click on links in emails, right? And then next thing you know, they get a message from HR that says, oh, we're going to be doing the company picnic. Click here to be able to sign up. Or they get a message from some other thing. We're going to be doing a survey. You're going to be getting a message from SurveyMonkey. You need to be able to click the link. Or we don't have the processes and standards in place that say, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to click on links and emails, and we're going to empower all these other parts of the organization to be able to not do that. We have inconsistent messages, and it confuses our users. So part of that is our education programs, right? And I'm going to step on some toes here. How many of you tell users, security is everybody's responsibility? You have messages like that. We have posters and that. Security is not everyone's responsibility. At the end of the day, it's just not. I'm probably going to step on some toes. I'm probably going to make some people mad. You can disagree with me afterwards. There are some behaviors we want them to do, but at the end of the day, our users aren't really the ones that are responsible for security. That's why we bring in security professionals, right? After the Equifax breach, you didn't see the users that developed the code get fired. You didn't see the people that weren't necessarily consistent on their patches getting fired. You saw the C-level person that took the responsibility for it. They're the people that are responsible, and your security people are responsible for making sure that our users know what to do. We can't necessarily always go into it and say our users should know all the security stuff that we know, and they should know it, because that's our job. We need to be able to give them the pieces that they should know and not much more, and that's really where the education comes in. Being able to treat education as something that is effective for our users and not just a checkbox. You have that annual security education that your company puts together. It's a 2-hour video that they have to watch, or they bring in somebody that's going to lecture them for 2 hours about all the different things that they have to do. So now they take that time out of their schedule, they come, they sit right here, they listen to it, and maybe 5% of it is applicable to their job. And the whole time that they're sitting there, they're going, really? I've got to sit and listen to this again? I don't need this. All I do is mop floors, or whatever. So we need to be able to make sure that our security training isn't one size fits all, that we can customize it, and that we can keep it simple so that our users understand the specific things that we want them to do, and that will be able to empower them to do their jobs and do it safely. And make it specific. So you don't have that same big 2-hour training for everybody. You have training that's specific to the people in specific roles. So when you have facilities staff that are doing maintenance and they do 1 or 2 applications, you don't need to have them sit and listen to 15 minutes about business email compromise. They're not going to get that email that says, hey, send me W-2s. And even if they do, they'll go, huh? I don't have access to that. So make your security training simple, make it short, make it frequent so that users get the points they need and can understand what they need to get out of it and be able to respond there. One way that we see that a lot is with phishing simulations. Do you phish your users? Send out simulations? They can be very effective as long as you use them properly, and we'll talk about some of that in a minute. Or you may have tabletop exercises that you want to do with certain portions of your organization. Be able to structure those so that they know what their role is and how they can interact. But again, don't bring people into the room that are going to be involved in these things, that are going to have to sit there for however many hours it's going to be, and they've got one thing. Yeah, I'm going to have to talk to the media. Okay, I got to sit here and listen to all this. It's not going to be effective. So again, we want to have alternate behaviors, right? You got that scratching post for the cat. So what are some of the alternate behaviors you might want to have for your users that click things? Well, let's take reporting phishing for an example. You want to make that easy. If you tell our users, all right, if you get a suspicious email message, you need to forward it to this big long email address that they've got to type in. And then they forward it to you. And then you call them and say, no, I can't do anything. I don't have email headers. You've got to open up a new message to me. Now you got to take that message, drag it in. They don't know that. Make it easy. Figure out a way to have an easy button. A lot of companies have plugins that you can do in Outlook where they can just click something and they can get that to you and they can get it to you quickly. You got to make the positive behavior easy, and then be able to give them immediate reinforcement so that when you do your phishing simulations and they report it, because that's the behavior you want, right? That's that positive behavior you want. You want to make sure they report if it's suspicious. Do you get them that immediate positive reinforcement? Yes, that was great. Have some Outlook rules or whatever going so that the minute they report that, or within a couple minutes, they get a response back. Yes, you identified something that could have been bad and you reported it, and we appreciate it. Or when they do report things that are outside of your simulations that are real threats, or even if it's just spam, that you give them that feedback in a fairly rapid manner so that they know, this is the behavior we want to do, this is the things we may not necessarily want to do. But if they just have this button that sends it away somewhere and they never get any feedback, you might be able to use that to harden your controls or do other things, but you're not going to change the behavior. You've got to be able to give the feedback back to the users in order to change behavior. And you may want to gamify it a little bit, right? Where'd it go? Come on, there we go. You might want to gamify it. So as you get statistics back and say, our ad sales department is great. They had a 60% reporting rate on our last phishing exercise. You can say, hey, next time you guys might want to measure up to that. You might not necessarily want to communicate that your facilities department had a 12% reporting rate, or that they had an 80% click rate. But make it competitive, because people love to compete. Have some way of rewarding the positive behavior too. Recognition, status, public recognition works really well. You see here, one of the things that we've done recently is we start to, for our phishing simulations, we give out some little things, and we have the little, we got them cheap at Oriental Trading Company. But we give them out with a little certificate on them. You can't see the certificate there. And we give the little ones out to the people who are the first ones to report a simulation. So every simulation, the first one to report it will get a little fishy, right? Anybody want a fishy? All right. But our people that are reporting threats, every month we give out a little bigger one with a little bigger certificate on it and say, this is the person that reported the most real threats in the month of whatever. And then we'll get a picture with them. And this guy had some fun with it, so we played it up a little bit. But we get a picture with them, and we share that with the company. These people are the people that are doing the positive things we want. Here, Robin. And that way, other people in the organization know that there's that positive thing. We don't communicate that, well, this person clicked on it, or this department did poorly. That's not going to get the behavior changes that you want to have. You want to limit the ability to do harm, right? That's the same thing that we were talking about, the child locks. This is where it comes down to the classic cyber hygiene. Your CIS top 20s, your least privilege, your multi-factor, all those things that you should be doing to secure your environment. You need to make sure you're still doing those. You need to make sure that you can limit the ability that our users have to shoot themselves in the foot. Because again, you're the security professional at the end of the day, or you're the IT professional. So limiting that ability to do harm is critical. And constant reinforcement, right? So we're not just having that once a year security training and, okay, go here and watch the thing and check the checkbox at the end. That you have ways of being able to communicate simply and effectively and frequently so that users know that those messages are at the top of their mind all the time. And again, remember that scolding only works if you catch them in the act. And even then, it's not very effective. You've got to keep it positive. You've got to make sure that you're not shaming people. If you're shaming your users, they're not going to come to you. So when they have that security event, the likelihood of them actually reporting it properly is fairly low. At the end of the day, what do you want? The user is going to click the link in the phishing mail, right? They're going to give away their credentials at some point in time. How many incidents have you done and investigated where when you finally get down to it and you get to the user that clicked and you say, what happened? Well, I got the email, and the minute I clicked it, I realized there was something wrong. How many of you hear that message when you actually get to, they know, right? The minute you click it, you know. Well, why didn't you report it? Well, I was afraid of what you were going to say, or I wasn't sure. Let's change that equation so that people know when they report, that's a good thing. We understand that mistakes are going to happen, right? but make sure that they know that they can come to us and they can report it, and we're not going to shame them. We're not going to throw them out. In fact, we may even take the opposite thing. So we may talk to them after the fact and say, in this security incident, you came to us and you reported it, and it's great. Can we use you as an example? And maybe tell the rest of the company, we had a mistake happen, and somebody clicked a link, and it happens. And they came to us, and because they came to us, and they came to us quickly, they called the help desk, they knew what to do, and we were able to go and find it, and we were able to respond, and we were able to quickly block those sites, or we were able to quickly take that machine off the network, and because of that, we could have saved ourselves millions of dollars in potential damage because the user recognized a mistake and reported it to us. If we can have that positive perspective, we can change behavior. Keep the goal in mind, right? When you own a pet, in this particular case we're talking about cats, there's going to be a certain amount of unpredictability, right? Uncertainty. You can't predict what they're going to do. They have a mind of their own. You have to take that into account, and that's part of the fun, right? Remember that in our companies, it's all about business. At the end of the day, they have to be able to do business. It's not always going to be predictable, and people are going to make decisions based on other factors as well, things outside of security. You just have to balance all that and keep a positive attitude about it. Does it work? Well, much of the time it does work. Be adaptable, be able to respond to those times when it doesn't, because it's not always perfect. All right, questions, comments, snide remarks, and references. Go ahead.
So give me an idea of what you think the minimum percentage of people you need to fish internally is to be effective.
100%. I don't see any reason that anybody should be exempted from your phishing exercises, and I've battled this over and over and over again. We can't send those to our executives. Okay, so let's make sure we post a notice on our website that says, our executives are exempt from phishing emails. Please, bad guys, don't send them to them. If a user can receive a message from an outside source that they can potentially click on or that can potentially cause them problems, they need to be part of your phishing exercises.
Well, those are the guys that are the most at risk anyway.
They can be, and a lot of times they'll have they may use the excuse, well, our execs handle those emails. And we had our director of risk actually sit down with some of our execs, our executive assistants, after we did a phishing exercise where we targeted the executives specifically, and those assistants were interacting with the messages, and we got some results. And he went online and he did a little bit of OPSEC, and he grabbed some data, or he grabbed information about them that he could find just in social media, walked up to their offices and just sat down and talked to them. They didn't know him from Adam. How are you? How did your kids do in their soccer game? How is it? And started to give them the perspective of what he could learn just digging information about them, and then making them realize just how effectively they could be targeted, as well as our executives, and some of the risks that were associated with there. And it ended up being a positive conversation. Yes, sir.
How do you see security kind of changing the dynamic of their relations with users, with other IT departments, to help with this awareness and the open communication back to security when they do experience something that is negative to security posture?
So if you don't have relationships with people, you can't change behavior. That's what it comes down to. If your security organization is perceived as these people that operate in this tower, and they're going to come to you and they are going to punish you, and it's going to be bad, and you never want to hear from security, they're not going to come to you. You're not going to be able to work with them to develop things. If you have that partnership, then they might say, hey, we're working on this project. We might be able to bring them in. Or if you start to insert yourself in positively in some of those things, you can affect behavior a lot more effectively. Yes, sir.
So, you said not to send unfixed messages. So the training sounds like it needs to start with management and the rest of the company first. So what do you do with the marketing and the HR to not send those surveys or do it differently?
So it all comes down to risk, right? And you have to be able to communicate that risk to people who can make the decisions. And thankfully, more and more often, as we have more and more compliance-driven things that are being seen from a high level, from a C level, from a board level, more and more those types of people are being exposed to security risks and security challenges. So if you can start to communicate back up and down again through your CISOs or through your other people that have a feedback at that level, you can drive change from both directions. So you can have your security professionals that are saying, you really don't need to do this, and then you can have the people at the higher level being able to say, well, how can we empower our organizations to function effectively and securely? All right, thank you for your time.